Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to our FameLab show, International Echoes. So my name's Denise Waddingham. I'm the director of the British Council here in the Czech Republic. We have a great afternoon's show for you with some really talented young scientists from across Europe. But I will hand over to our Science Communication Ambassador, Dr. Michael Londesborough, who's been so involved and such a big supporter of all the work of the British Council and FameLab over the years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, all of you, for coming along to what will be a wonderful afternoon's entertainment. May I also include in our thanks these wonderful institutions such as the British Council, British Embassy, and particularly Academy of Sciences, the Czech Republic, Czech Centres, the Foundation of Tomáš Batí, Adeto, and Cheltenham Festivals for all their help in organisation, financing, and also the brainchild of all these activities at Cheltenham. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, not only you for coming, but also for the people who will be presenting for coming, because it's an international crowd that we're going to see tonight or today. And I think one of the major pins of success in scientific endeavour is the exchange of scientific views and opinions and ideas across an international crowd and audience. So we're very fortunate today to have with us people from all over Europe who'll be talking to you about their scientific work or scientific stories of which they're particularly fond. Can I ask you, are all of you here familiar with FameLab? Just the one here. Okay, so FameLab is a competition for young scientists who have 3 minutes to talk about the scientific subject of their choice. It's usually done on a stage such as this, and after 3 minutes, there's a panel of expert judges which adjudicate their performance, both their style, the content, how well and effectively they came across with their scientific content. But today, there's going to be no adjudication. There's going to be no winner. It's purely going to be entertainment for all of you. However, you will certainly have the opportunity to ask questions. So if you feel inspired by what they have to say, do take the opportunity to join us with a conversation after each talk about the particular scientific field. Okay, so we're gonna start with our first talker. Comes from Hungary, and she's studying at the Department of Atomic Physics at the Eötvös Loránd University. Her name is Agnes Kirchtort, and if I can welcome on stage, Agnes today is very brave. Welcome again, Agnes. She's carrying a scientific injury. Her thumb, if you can waggle your thumb for me, she burnt it both at minus 198 degrees Celsius using liquid nitrogen, and then shortly after when experimenting with rocket fuel at several hundred degrees above the boiling point of water. So Agnes, despite your injury, thank you for coming along. Now, Agnes, her passion at the beginning was mathematics, through which you discovered physics, through which you discovered the wonders of teaching, hence the injury during your teaching there. And then, of course, you're currently working on your PhD on the wonderful field of cosmological ionized bubbles, which sounds a bit like a good champagne.
Yes.
And however, I'm sure you might be touching on similar topics today, because you're going to be telling us about the night sky and the wonderful, mysterious objects that we call black holes.
Yes.
Am I correct? Okay, so I'm going to...
And there is actually a connection between the black holes and my research topic, but it's just not obvious at first sight and first hearing. And we didn't talk about it in the morning, but maybe after.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm going to disappear into the black hole here, and I'm going to let you kick off the whole talk with your wonderful explanation of the black hole. So Agnes, the floor is yours. Thank you.
black holes are the most mysterious creatures. Everybody heard about them, that no one has ever seen one. Does that mean that they are actually just a fiction? They don't exist? No, it's not the truth. The truth is that they are not like a unicorn or a mermaid. They are more like an invisible little baby. To illustrate you this, invisible little Charlie came with me today. Let me introduce you. Hey, Charlie. Let's sit you here. And of course, we brought you a black hole as well. If you please, sir. Thank you. Where should I put it? Put it here. So the first similarity between my invisible little baby and the black hole is striking. They are both invisible. The child probably inherited it from his grandfather. On the other hand, the black hole is invisible because an extremely large amount of mass is concentrated inside a tiny little space. It has such strong gravitational effect that it swallows everything, even light. And without light, there is no sight. I can't see it. So then how do we know that they are actually here? Because they are both influence their surroundings. Admit it, if there is a baby in the family, then the whole family's life is gonna revolve around him. Mommy, daddy, and all the sibling lives will be affected by this little cutie pie's needs. If we just observe the family members' behavior all day, we're gonna find out there is a baby in the family, even though we do not see him. In the black hole's case, it's exactly the same situation. We do not see the black hole, but it has such strong gravitational effect that all the surrounding stars are gonna circulate around it. If we just observe the stars' movement and we see the stars, then we're gonna find out that in the middle there is a black hole. So it's easy. Oh, I think my little baby just got hungry. It's not a surprise, he is from Hungary. Of course. If we try to feed a little one, everyone who ever tried it knows that things get messy and not all of the food we're gonna land in his mouth. The food, part of the food we're gonna just cover everything else, the entire dining room. And if he even starts to cry, then all the neighborhood will know that little Charlie is just having its lunch. If you ever try to feed a black hole, it's exactly the same situation. Of course, it has its lunchtime. It has its lunchtime and finds something to consume. Not exactly baby food, rather some hydrogen, topped with helium, and stuffed with just a pinch of interstellar dust. But if it finds something to consume, it gets so eager that it finally eats, that things get messy in the process. Only some part of the food will land inside the black hole. The rest will simply radiate out before it gets swallowed and cover the surrounding space with light. That black hole, which was almost unnoticeable before, when it's eaten, it's so gorgeous that not just a neighborhood, but almost all the universe will see that this black hole is just having its lunch. Black holes maybe must be mysterious creatures, but they like to hide. But when they are eating, they can be so luminous that they can easily outshine even an entire galaxy. So, are they still mysterious? No. We believe in lots of things we cannot see. For example, we believe in God, or love, or bacteria, or parasites. But when it comes to black holes, we don't need faith. We just need to see the whole picture, the black hole picture. Thank you very much.
Agnes, thank you very much indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, are there any of you here who are excited to ask a question about black holes, hungry black holes, eating black holes? Yes.
What colors can you see around the black holes? Is it all
Okay, so you mentioned that there's a lot of light coming around, there's a lot of luminance. So what are the colors we can see around a black hole?
That's a tough question, but I can say that if a black hole is swallowing something, it gets so shiny that it radiates an entire spectra. So the color, is, you know, it depends on what how do you say it? Yeah, thank you very much. What wavelength is the most that you see from this object? And from this kind of object, it is all around the spectra, all the way it can radiate in every wavelength, even very high energy photons, of course, the photons which we see, and other spectra as well, the radio, and everything. So it's really hard to say what is the color of this object, because it has every color which can be possible. But usually on the night sky they appear very similar to like really random stars. So.
Okay, so that was the colours that are being emitted from, or the radiation that's being emitted from these black holes gorging on various matter. Anybody else? Is anybody?
Just one more thing.
Yes.
Just I don't know if you are curious about it, but just one thing, that usually with stars, this is why we can separate stars from these kind of objects. I'm gonna say the name because it's easier. These kind of very luminous, the most luminous objects in the universe, when supermassive black holes is eating, it's called quasars. So this is how we can, separate between stars and quasars. That, for example, stars have a certain spectra, which has usually a huge peak at some wavelength. And for example, the other one, which looks exactly like a star, but it has a very different spectra with all around all the wavelengths. And this is one differences between the two objects.
I see. So presumably the more energetic, then the wider the sort of the wavelength band that's been emitted.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about, is anybody here scared of black holes eating up our own planet and galaxy? Has anybody looked into the night sky hoping to see a black hole? Yes. Over there, can I ask the lady with the glasses there? Yes.
They are just afraid.
Oh, you can't speak? Or can you whisper it to the... Have you have a question? You don't have a question. Okay, so... Okay, Lucy, you've got a question.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, do you believe that we can actually travel in a time with a black hole?
Do you believe we can use a black hole to travel in time?
Yeah, we were just talking about during lunch, and this topic, that what's going to happen if
Is
you
that
go
the sort of
inside a
concept
black
of
hole?
two black holes and meet? You can have like a wormhole and go through it or something?
Yeah, actually, every scientist is very enthusiastic about this question. What's going to happen if we go inside a black hole? And there are, very different theories, mostly very science fiction or something. But probably you're just going to end up die when you reach the event horizon, or before that. But at least when you are reaching the event horizon, this is the area or this border. When you cross, then you can't come back, because every black hole has this border, and everything which inside the border can't come out. This is the whole idea of the black hole. And if we are not die before we reach this event horizon, that we're gonna die there because of the different. For example, if you go with the head first, then your head and your foot is gonna be, like torn apart. And I don't think that we can build anything which could survive this kind of effects and this kind of strong things.
I can seem to remember there was reading a part of a book. I think it might have been even written by Stephen Hawking. I'm not too sure, but in that book it says something about spaghettification.
Yes,
so you become drawn like a long piece of spaghetti.
Yes,
so if you go in as feet first, and you're being you become this long sort of bit of spaghetti, which
yes,
I presume
we're gonna go through this spaghettification. Yes,
which I don't think we'd be able to survive, but.
So we were just talking about during lunch that maybe my next talk could be about this effect, and I should definitely bring some spaghetti with me.
Okay. Well, Agnieszka, certainly you've made me feel more relaxed about my understanding of black holes, and I no longer will fear the consumption of our planet or galaxy in the near future, at least.
Okay, and can I tell you some more thing before you shut me down?
Oh, go on then.
If no one asks, you were mentioned the cosmological ionized bubbles.
Cosmological, yes.
And just because this whole day it looks so mysterious, I just wanted to know that I was talking about these quasars. These are the most luminous objects in the universe, and they are so powerful sources. They create so many high energy photons, so they can ionize their surrounding area, and this is why the cosmological ionized bubbles are. That if you imagine there is a galaxy, for example here, and in the middle of the galaxy there is a supermassive black hole which has its lunchtime, and it's radiates out very intensely, and it creates like a huge big ionized bubble around it. It's called bubbles because it has a sphere shape, and this is why it's cosmological ionized bubbles.
Well, fantastic. Well, good luck with your cosmological ionized bubbles.
Thank you
and
very much.
thank you very much for coming to Prague. And with that, round of applause, please, for Agnes.
Thank you.
And thank you. And we are now going to move on quickly from Hungary to Spain, and indeed to Juan Margalef, who is working at the University Carlos in Madrid. Welcome, Juan.
Thank you so
and
much.
You are a mathematician and a physicist. We just were learning about some of the largest structures in the universe, which we understand with Einstein's theory of relativity. I'm a chemist looking at very small molecules that are tiny, and they usually obey rules of quantum physics. Now, there's a big challenge in the scientific world how we can link quantum mechanics with these huge, big-scale theories of relativity. And this young man here has been working on ways to try to link the two together, which is a huge task, which I'm very grateful for, Juan. But Juan, today you're going to be talking about something, rather philosophical in a way.
Yeah, it's a bit more fundamental.
More fundamental. Juan's going to tell us a bit how sometimes, or often in life, and certainly in science, the questions are more important than the answers themselves. So good luck, Juan.
Thank you so much. This is Alex, a parrot who was part of an experiment about language in birds. He achieved basic communication and could answer simple questions. But one day, something extraordinary happened. He saw in a mirror his own gray feathers, a color unknown to him, and said, "What color?" Alex became like that, the first and only non-human to ever ask a question. It's amazing, think about that, because he was demonstrating his desire for knowledge, a desire who was thought to be exclusively human. Besides, here we can see how, in fact, the question is actually more important than the answer. The answer was just gray, but the question gave us a lot. And this is something that has happened many times in science, like the theory of special relativity. It appears, or it was developed by Einstein when he wondered how he would perceive the world if he could travel at the speed of light. Probability, complex number, and many other branches arose from questions that might not seem so important at first. In fact, there is a great mathematician, French mathematician, called Henri Poincaré, that poses a question that's especially intriguing to me. What's the shape of a rotating planet? Planets are spherical, right? But surely you've heard that the Earth flattens at the poles. That's because the Earth is spinning, so the equator travels faster, making it bulge outward. So our planet gets flatter the faster it spins. But could it be as flat as we want? Well, it turned out it can't. Because if it spun very fast, it would be so thin and so big that it becomes unstable. And any disturbance would cause it to collapse. After collapsing, it would take on a new shape, an ellipsoid. This is some sort of rugby ball. And this is not just a mathematical trick, because it has been found, a dwarf planet called Haumea that spins fast enough to have this shape. Now, what would happen if this planet began to spin even faster? Well, it would stretch, and again, at a certain speed, it would stretch so much that it becomes so thin and large that it becomes unstable again, and it would abruptly collapse. Now, the shape it would have is even stranger, is that of a bullet. Well, this is the answer Poincaré was looking for. But the question gave us much more. Over the years, new branches of mathematics emerged. One of them is the catastrophe theory. It was developed by another great French mathematician called René Thom, when he wondered how and why biological structures end up having the shape they have, like cells, our organs, the fingers of our hands, or the Alex feathers. He realized that during these formation processes of these biological structures, abrupt changes were taking place, like the ones for the planets. Catastrophe theory appears in many branches, like in physics, in biology, as I mentioned already, in economics, computer science, and even in your breakfast. Because if you put a Mac under the light, you will see how it bounces on this side, creating this beautiful pattern. This lit up section is called caustic. And you can see that there is an abrupt change in the illumination. Here is a lot of light, and here is none, almost. And this is what is called a caustic, and this is a catastrophe. And it's the same that appears at the bottom of a swimming pool. All these lit up lines are caustics, are catastrophes. So you can see that catastrophes are everywhere surrounding us. So be on the alert for them. In fact, if you're alert enough, the next time someone asks you a question, you might be able not only to respond, but also to open a new branch of knowledge. That being said, do you have any questions?
Well, do you have any questions? Any questions about anything? Yes.
I must say I haven't, but I know. I mean,
so I'm just going to repeat the question.
Yes.
So the question is whether Juan knows Star Trek because he's a very young man, or is there some reality in Star Trek and what happens in Star Trek?
Well, I would say it's both. I mean, there is no contradiction in that. I mean, there are a lot of Asimov, for instance. He has a lot of like crazy ideas that later on they were developed. Like one of the funny examples I really like is Wikipedia. At some point, Asimov talked about one big like library that everybody can access everywhere, and you can get information right away from all the places. And he was talking about in the 60s. And 50 years later, Wikipedia was created. And at the time it was nonsense because everybody was reading from books, so it was completely nonsense. So from the physics we know today, it's nonsense. But of course, the physics we know today might be wrong. So the mathematics are like established, are written in rock, but physics is not. Like Newton, he developed a very well theory, completely right mathematically, but physically, it doesn't describe properly all kind of physical phenomena. Because a lot of phenomena, like when you have a high speed or a lot of mass, you need general relativity or special relativity. And it was a right theory, but not for all problems, not for all situations. So maybe we are the same right now. So maybe with the physics we know now, it's completely nonsense. But maybe there is more physics beyond what we know, and then it will be probable. And it's nice because in science fiction you put the problem, you study the problems that will go with this new technology before the technology is here. And it's really nice. I sometimes read that the science fiction, the good thing is not predicting the car, but predicting the traffic jam, which is really nice. Because, okay, the car or something is something that I could have imagined. But the problems that come with that are the funny things. And the structural ethics, they did a nice job. Like, what would happen if we merge different civilization on that?
Thank you. Well, I hope that sort of... Well, so I suppose there's... Okay. And any other questions? Yes, at the back, sir. So if Juan could approach or indeed work out the answer to any scientific question, which would it be and why?
That's a good question. No, actually, what I would rather is to pose a question that nobody else has to think about it. But answering your question, there are some questions that I would like to answer. Like, for instance, if there exists, only if there exists, I would be happy knowing if there exists a theory that explains both quantum mechanics and general relativity. I'm not even asking which one is it. So, of course, if I can ask anything, I would ask which is this theory. But only does exist a theory that merges both of them. I will be really, really happy to know either it's true or not, because that's what I'm studying. So if it's a no, I can spare a lot of time and say, okay, there is no answer. But still, as I mentioned before, in the looking for an answer, even if this answer doesn't exist, you will learn a lot. you will find a lot of things anyway. But I don't know, I will think about a cooler question maybe.
Yeah, I think generally though, in science, that's what it's about, isn't it? You set up with one question and you realize during the answering of that question, or your attempt to answer that question, that indeed there's lots of other fascinating questions that arise from that original endeavor.
Yeah. Like actually the question that Einstein wondered was, what happened if I travel at the speed of light? Today we know that this is nonsense. You cannot go at the speed of light. But the fact that he was wondering that lead to all this new theory and to new physics, which is really great. And we know that the question was, now we would say it's a stupid question. But at the time was a really good one.
But I must admit, when listening to you speak, and this is what I'm fascinated by many mathematicians, is that you push things to logical extremes and ask questions which I think the general common sense wouldn't ask. So, for example, this idea that a planet, because if I think about the shape of the planet, for me it's obvious it's going to be a sphere because gravity is acting on it equally, so it's going to take the form of a sphere. And that's it. That's the end. That's a solution. And then if it's spinning, of course, you've got a spinning sphere, then you're going to get a slight sort of compression and extension. But then somebody sits there and thinks, well, what happens if we do it all the way, keep spinning to fast enough that it gets into a squashed, that's like the flat Earth principle. And you're thinking, wow, that's pretty wacky, but somebody's thought about it and then took it seriously. And I think that's great. I'm glad that we've got scientists who can think of these wacky ideas and take it seriously.
Exactly.
And then on the way, they discover things like relativity.
That's pretty cool.
Juan, thank you very much for your time, for your effort, for your science.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Not at all. Okay, enjoy the rest of your time here in Prague. Yes.
I'm sorry to step out to the stage, but I forget Charlie here.
Of course. Charlie and the black hole, yeah. Well, I almost walked into it. Okay, thank you very much. Charlie, he must be hungry now. And his nappy's need changing, I can smell it. Okay, now we're going to move swiftly to Poland. But before we do, can I ask you, do you have any superheroes that you are particularly fond of? Do you read comics about, I don't know, Superman or Spider-Man or whoever? Well, I think one of my favorites is Batman, and certainly it's one of the favorites of our next speaker, Ruth Dudek-Wicha from Poland, indeed from a city which is close to my heart, Wrocław, which is a place where I'm a boron hydride chemist, and it's the university where the first boron hydrides were synthesized, so it's a place which I am very fond of. And Ruth is not just a scientist, but a talented musician.
How do you know if talented?
I know everything.
Okay.
I asked the mathematician.
You're a prophet.
Yes. And so apart from her love as a musician, then of course she's very much into bacterial biofilms, and we're going to learn more about that. So Ruth,
right.
It's up to you. The floor is yours.
Okay, please close your eyes and use your imagination now. Imagine that you are walking through Gotham City. It's a cool evening and the smell of mystery and car exhaust fills the air. Everyone is running somewhere, but you are expecting to see something off the wall as befits this legendary city. Maybe you would like to see Batgirl sneaking between skyscrapers, or just the fight between good and evil. But suddenly you see Batman laughing at the top of his lungs, and just next to him you see the Joker. He's jumping up and down and waving his hands around. They are going into an Irish pub. Yeah, you can open your eyes. What is your first thought? Mine would be, what the hell, where's the hidden camera? But do not judge too easily, because Batman knows what he's doing. He knows the rule, keep your friends close, but your enemies even closer. Scientists are also familiar with this rule. To fight bacteria effectively, they have to get closer to them and study their behavior and structure. Now they know that bacteria occur not only in the form of a free-floating single cells, called planktonic, but more often in the form of a biofilm. A biofilm is a microbial community, a structure where bacterial cells are connected to each other. They can communicate and they adhere to a surface, and all of this makes them much more difficult to get rid of. Every organ in our body is exposed to biofilm infections, but bone infections are some of the most difficult to treat. And in this case, scientists want to outsmart this biofilm. But how? Well, they combined two groups of drugs. First, bisphosphonates. Bisphosphonates are used in the treatment of osteoporosis and bone metastasis. They have brilliant property. They can recognize bone and build into the mineral that create bone hydroxyapatite. Second group of drug is a bactericidal antibiotic from fluoroquinolone group, ciprofloxacin. After combining these two drugs, a fabulous conjugate with a fabulous name BV600022 arises. We will just call it conjugate. How does it work? I will demonstrate it on my own bone, which will be easy. Yes. After getting into the bloodstream, bisphosphonate searches for bone and builds into the bone, while ciprofloxacin protrudes above the surface of the bone, and she's forming such a protective mini umbrella. She's waiting for conditions that allow her to fulfill her murderous function. When does this happen? When the body triggers an inflammatory reaction due to the appearance of a bacteria. Subsequently, acidification of the environment occurs, which means that pH level decrease, and this weakens the binding between molecules in the conjugate. Ciprofloxacin breaks off and kills the bacteria. It is so easy, isn't it? The introduction of such a conjugate to the treatment will bring us many benefits. We will be able to better fight bacterial biofilm and even prevent its creation. While we won't know whether Batman figured something out to destroy Joker until they come out of the Irish pub, likewise, it will take a few years to know if the new conjugate will be effective enough. But one thing can be sure, scientists and gems seldom agree over Bond, just as Batman and the Joker seldom agree over Gotham City. Thank you.
Thank you. Is your leg okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Right, so any questions about bacterial biofilms and how
This
such
is
work
real
can...
bone, you know.
It's really well. Yeah. So, are all bacteria capable of making these biofilms? Are all bacteria? And you mentioned communication. How does that work? How do they talk to one another?
There is something that we call quorum sensing. It's a kind of type of communication between bacteria in a biofilm. In a biofilm, biofilm may consist of one type of bacteria or several types, even fungi also. But they produce some kind of microchemicals, and they communicate with these microsubstances.
And is it generally true that these biofilms of bacteria are more resistant to antibiotics than if they stay sort of isolated, singular?
Yes, definitely. They produce also matrix. It's a polysaccharide like saliva, something like saliva, and it's like a weapon from the antibiotic.
Okay.
Also.
Okay. So any points of view here about antibiotics and their use and their effectivity? No. And so tell us more a bit about what stage are these being used currently on human beings, or what's the state of the research? And
they want to do the research on the animal model, bigger animal model, because they did already on the rats, but they want to do this on bigger model. And after that, the next step will clinical trials will be.
And once that conjugate separates and the sort of this warhead activates and kills the bacteria, the remaining biphosphate, that's okay there. It doesn't cause any...
Just strengthen the bone.
It just strengthens the bone, but not too much. It doesn't cause...
No,
it can't cause like a precipitation of other bone bits and it sort of links together.
Not at all,
No. So it seems quite a silver bullet.
Yes.
Well, congratulations. Yes. So the question is, if this turns out to be successful with humans, will this also be the key to further antibiotic replacement in humans?
I think scientists will try to do this with gentamicin, yes, because it's very popular in treating bone infections. However, they do this with ciprofloxacin because it's quite cheap and popular. This was the reason, yeah. But the binding, it's possible to do binding also with other antibiotics.
As I understand as well, one of the problems of antibiotics is that it kills a lot of useful bacteria that we have especially in our guts. Mm-hmm. Would this method ensure that the antibiotic gets only to the area that you want it to get to, and it won't harm any of
That's
the...
right.
That's right.
Thanks to that, we can avoid systemic effect. We just direct the drug exactly to the bone.
Fantastic. So that would certainly be sort of a very specific use of the drug. Okay, well, best of luck.
Thank you.
And, I hope you... I mean, they say break a leg for the stage, but you've taken yours out. So I hope you can manage to surgically put it back in, yeah. And that was with no antiseptic. Now, from bacteria, we're going to hop on to viruses, another scourge of our human lives. And the young gentleman who's going to be telling us about it is originally from Turkey, Veli, and he's now working in Heidelberg, the beautiful city of Heidelberg in Germany. And you've got quite a CV here of molecular biology and genetics and chemistry and mathematics. And you've had internships in Italy and America and Germany, looking at a PhD on mouse developmental genetics. And now you're looking even at plant physiology as well. So this is quite an impressive CV. And speaking to you, I was fascinated to learn, because when I was studying biology at school, which was many years ago, unfortunately, I was taught that there was sections of the DNA molecule which coded for proteins and was useful DNA, and then huge fathoms of the DNA which would be junk, useless. And now, of course, we're learning that's not the case at all. And speaking to you now, that 2% of this DNA is actually coding for proteins, and up to 10% of our DNA are actually viral DNA, which we've incorporated into our cells. So I'm going to allow you to tell us a bit about how this incorporated viral DNA, what it means for us and what it means for our history.
Thanks for setting the stage. As you said, I've been around. I went through a lot through my PhD. And my parents think that actually it was a mistake. My girlfriend's parents also think that it was a mistake. My girlfriend thinks that I should get a real job. And all this happened because I stopped worrying about viruses and I started loving playing with viruses. I will explain. Viruses are amazing, but you never hear about the good viruses. There are always HIV, Ebola, bad viruses. This was the same like 18th century. There was a virus, cowpox virus, krava, no, pox virus, that saved millions of lives. Because if you had that virus at that time, it wouldn't harm you, but it would protect you from another virus called smallpox virus. Smallpox virus was small, really contagious, and very dangerous. So 20% of London, for example, was infected with cowpox virus, smallpox virus, and 35% of the people infected died. So cowpox virus was amazing. And an English physician like Lucy, who is coming as the next speaker, decided to glorify this krava pox virus. So he focused on the cow part of it, forgot about the virus. And he used the Latin word for cow, which is vacca or vaxa. So we came up with a new word, or he came up with a new word, vaccine. Vaccine? Is my Czech good? So, we had a brand new, basically, word, vaccine. If we summarize the event, there was a good virus, a bad virus, and a sick cow. And now what we remember is a bad virus and a good cow. Like the good viruses are forgotten already. Another example is from 17th century Holland. If you look at the paintings of this era, they have the most beautiful tulips. They've got amazing patterns and colors, and only in this short period of time. Not the tulips before, not the tulips after, only in this short period of time. And the reason is, these tulips contained a beautiful mosaic virus. So this virus got into the tulip, integrated itself randomly in the genome. Every integration was a new color. Every integration was a new pattern. And then an economic crisis took place. So, as in any crisis, they were looking for someone to blame. And the Dutch king said, let's kill all these evil tulips. Ridiculous, right? But this actually happened. They killed all the tulips, and this beautiful mosaic virus couldn't find a new host and got extinct. Since then, we don't have these beautiful tulips anymore. I thought things would get better when we unraveled the human genome, because we found out that there are more than 100,000 viruses that are already a part of our DNA. Just to put this in a perspective, between the DNA of an ape, the ape, and your DNA, for example, there is only 1% difference. And these viruses make up 8% of our DNA. Can you imagine how we would look like without these viruses? Maybe I can give you an idea. Viruses are really good at catching hosts. They need to find hosts. So they are good at communicating. And this is exactly what we needed when we were all embryos. We needed to attach to our mother. So long time ago, our ancestors hosted a virus. And this virus produced a protein called syncytin to communicate with our ancestors. And this is exactly the protein that we all used when we were embryos to attach to our mother's uterus. Without this syncytin, without this virus, the pregnancy doesn't work. So thanks to a virus, we spent the first 9 months of our lives in the all-inclusive 5-star hotel of our mother. So, Prague. There are still hundreds of thousands of viruses that we don't know what they are doing. And we have all the tools in the lab to investigate whether the virus that you come across with is a good one, a bad one, or a dirty one. So don't just run away when you see or meet a virus. Just bring it to the lab, and then we investigate it all together. And then you will understand why playing with viruses is so much fun. Thank you very much.
Well, you know, I'm looking at viruses in a completely different light now. There must have been a virus that infected you that made you the PR man of viruses.
I'm getting paid very well.
Just in the same way that sharks required somebody to tell them that actually not all sharks will eat you, or not all crocodiles will snap at you. There's somebody here. We've got somebody here who's telling us that not all viruses are bad. Some are in fact very good for us, and indeed our DNA is constituent 10% of viral DNA. So, any questions about viruses? Good ones, bad ones? Yes, sir. So the question is it the case that good or bad viruses are affecting different parts of our genome?
That's a really, really good question. So what we know is that it is very much random, but different viruses have different tendencies. So some of them are more targeting to the genes, the proteins that are needed by us. And then if they integrate there, then it's not good for us. But if they integrate to a part where it actually modulates, for example, increases or decreases the protein's function, then it actually may turn into something really, really useful for us. And we know a couple of examples where this took place, and then we got, for example, we became more resistant to certain diseases because of exactly, as you said, integration sites.
Yes, the young lady at the back. Equipment.
And I would like to know how you explore DNA, how it's done really.
Okay, so the question is, how do you, in your lab, you mentioned in your lab you've got everything you need to explore the viruses and its DNA. How do you, how do you do it? Can you summarize it?
So this is the fun part of it. It's a playground, so you can do many different things. For example, you can take out one of the viruses, and you can transfer it to a tube, and you can amplify them in the tubes so that it's really safe. And then you can put it to another host and see if you see similarities between where you took it and where you put it. Or there are also tools that we can now remove the viruses from the host, and we see if there is any difference in the host. For example, host was host was dying in 45 degrees, and if we remove this virus, so will it be more resistant or will it be more sensitive to it? Now we have got an enormous number of tools, and some of them already got Nobel Prizes, some of them are sort of on the way to play with this, and it's a jungle that when you come to the lab you will see many of them. But this is the main two methods: to put it to somewhere else and to remove it from the host.
Can we, if I extrapolate from that, can we, in your laboratory, can we make synthetic viruses?
Yes, you can make synthetic viruses, you can make a number of different viruses, but the problem with the viruses is when you make them synthetic, they are benign. So there must be tools basically to deliver it to the host.
But why are they benign?
Sorry?
Why are they benign?
Because they cannot pass through our cell membrane.
I see.
So that makes them safe. So we are safe if we only meet the virus's DNA sequences. But once they are in, then we can actually follow what they are doing, something good or something bad. So that makes it a safe tool or safe biological system to investigate and to play around with.
But what you're saying, for me, sounds as if that viruses have, in our past and in our present, they are one of the main drivers for our own evolution. If they're incorporating themselves into our own DNA, they're flicking switches on and off, doing different things like that. So can we not use them very constructively, as in synthetic viruses, which would do something then to your, would epigenetically transform you into something else?
That's a brilliant question, and there is, I think, a very futuristic answer to this. There is, when you compare the proteins, what makes the body, between the apes, for example, chimp, and humans, the difference is like almost nothing, almost 1 in a million, like really nothing. So what makes the difference is basically these viral sequences. And one of them is really, really special. So because this is different between, this is only present in the humans, and this is only active, basically, in the brain. So now people think that maybe this is contributing to our intelligence. And if you imagine how, what is the mathematical skill of an ape and a human, so calculus is impossible, or adding and subtracting is impossible for them. So if we play it constructively, again, it's a science fiction at the moment, but we can actually come to an intelligence level that, you know, calculus and all these space physics measurements are just trivial to us. So I think this is a very, you know, a bright future to think about, but still we are far from playing with it and seeing it in at the organismal level.
Well, a fascinating topic. So, well, thank you very much indeed for now. Unless, of course, there are any... Oh, there are some urgent questions I can see. Is the two young ladies there in the middle? Do you have a question? Or you're just waving at me? The young lady here then, okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a rather touching, you know, you've enlightened somebody today. Well, I think you've enlightened most of us here today that there are good viruses. So thank you very much, and good luck with your study of such viruses, and hopefully maybe the synthesis of new viruses that are going to make us a bit more intelligent and disease-free. So thank you very much indeed, Veli.
Thank you very much.
We're going to stay on topic with illnesses, or at least we're going to be on health. And our next guest and speaker is Lucy Guile from the United Kingdom. And she works at the National Health Service, the NHS. Thank you very much. And Lucy is not only a junior doctor, but is also an explorer. And indeed, from our brief discussions over lunch and prior to that, I've found out that you've visited many exotic destinations around the world. Indeed, I've even seen a video of her swimming with great white sharks off the coast of South Africa. So this is somebody who's also not only extremely intelligent, but extremely brave. And you've also...
maybe.
I don't know what virus you got to get all these special... properties. But yes, I'm just looking through your list here. Borneo, Peru, Ecuador, Fiji, Himalayas. And you've met lots of wonderful people along your way. And you've also been quite observant about how they keep healthy.
That's
and how their customs and rituals change from how they are here in the West. And you'll be telling us something about a question whether we here, at least in the West, whether we're not keeping ourselves a bit too clean.
That's right. Let's talk about the 5-second rule. Most of you have heard of this, right? This is the idea that when you drop a bit of food on the floor, if you pick it up again quickly enough, then it's still safe to eat. And this is a fascinating idea that can involve the stretching of time. So the length of the 5 seconds is related to how delicious the bit of food was that you dropped. But that aside, for those of you who don't use this rule or claim not to, I guess you think it's unhealthy, unhygienic. Germs are bad, right? Or maybe not, as we just heard from Veli. I'm going to tell you why the 5-second rule is a good thing. Not because the jam donut that you dropped on the floor at the bus stop and then picked up and ate last week, you know who you are. Not because that didn't pick up any germs, but because it did. So as a doctor, I see patients all the time with allergic conditions like asthma and eczema, food allergies. And the thing that they have in common is that their immune systems are hyperactive, meaning they try to attack harmless bits of the environment that the people come into contact with, causing these symptoms of allergy. Now, the really interesting thing is that this is a new phenomenon, or the scale of it is. So in the UK, where I work, over the last 30 years, the rate of admissions to hospital with anaphylaxis, which is the most severe life-threatening form of allergy, has gone up by, I don't know, what do you think? 10%? 100%? It's gone up by 700% in 30 years. That's absolutely huge. And while the rate of allergic diseases in countries in lots of parts of Europe have been steadily going up and up and up, probably over more like the last century, the rate of infectious diseases in the same countries in the same time period has been going down and down and down. And many scientists think that these trends are related, giving rise to an idea known as the hygiene hypothesis. Basically, bacteria and viruses, as we've heard, have been around for a lot longer than we have, and our immune systems are used to them. The hygiene hypothesis argues that exposure early on in life to a range of environmental bacteria and viruses, maybe parasites as well, it trains our immune system, teaching it what it needs to respond to and what it can just ignore or tolerate. And without this, the argument goes, allergies develop. But it's not time to stop showering yet. But it's true, though, that our increasingly indoor urban lifestyles, which are a bit more isolated than the lifestyles that people used to live in the past, don't expose us to the same wide range of environmental bugs that we were exposed to in our evolutionary history, and this seems to have consequences in the form of allergy. So maybe we don't need to be so afraid of our little bacterial buddies. Some of them might be friendlier than you think. Thank you.
Lucy, thank you for extending the 5-second rule to 3 minutes.
Yep.
And
I told you, if it tastes good, 5 seconds can be longer than 5 seconds.
It reminds me a bit of, you know, as a daddy of 3 children, and when they were on their, you know, they were sucking on dummies, and then when the dummy falls on the floor, as it does frequently, especially if you're out and about, I find the sort of the parental instinct in me was to pick it up, suck it, and then give it back. So I would take off the whatever grime or potential bacteria or viruses which had been joined onto it, and I would sacrifice and then give it to But then when you think about it, actually the chances are probably that I'm passing on more stuff to the kid from my own mouth. Would that be correct to assume?
That might well be the case. I mean, I think you're right if a dummy or something like that drops and looks looks obviously dirty, or it drops somewhere that you obviously don't want to get germs from, like into a cow pile or something, you definitely need to clean that properly, and probably not in your mouth. But I think you're right that you would probably be exchanging as many, if not more, germs between yourself and your child by doing that. Although actually, if you live with someone, then the chances are that you already share a large part of your sort of bacterial and viral, like microbial flora, as you might call it. And it's been shown in studies that if you're a child who has siblings, then you're less likely to develop allergies than an only child. And that's undoubtedly because of the sharing of germs between yourself and your siblings. And that seems to be a thing that protects you to some extent from allergy.
So how close are we to, I mean, I read a lot nowadays about the importance of the microflora in our gut in particular. And now there's even good studies showing that it has an incredible impact on the development of our brains, for example. So how close are we to having an understanding what is the ideal sort of diversity of germs, and will it then be possible to synthetically, or at least to sell packets of germs which you could add to our breakfast cereals or spread on a piece of toast or whatever it might be?
So that's a really interesting question. I think the answer is probably we are nowhere near knowing what is the optimal sort of combination or amount of bugs to have on board. And the reason for that is that although seemingly exposure to sort of microbes and stuff and parasites when you're young may protect you from allergies, of course there are very real risks of infections. And now it's important to remember, as Veli sort of touched on, that not all bugs are bad for you. Some of them definitely are though. And so if you're generally exposed to more germs, you are going to have a higher rate of infection, and some of those infections will be serious. And it's important to remember that in lots of parts of the world, lots of people die from infections, which we don't have to worry about so much here in the UK. So it's not an easy balance to strike by any means, and I don't think there is an answer at the moment.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions about either some of these germs or bugs, or indeed about some of the adventures that you've had in different parts of the world? Well, if not from the audience, then maybe I would. Can you tell us something a bit about what?
Got one there.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, sir.
Thanks for what you just presented to us. Because I love my thoughts. It's like not to take so much, but I here and there. But again, the other part of the story. Also, with sometimes infection by not caring so much would I be aware. The important from here, we've been told since we better form at least strong liquid that's like get the shot in and kill you, like your guts, etc. Is it true?
So the question is, do drinks with high concentrations of alcohol defend you from bad germs?
So I don't know the answer to that, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if it did protect you from, some types of things. I mean, you can sterilize stuff with alcohol, can't you? So logically it would be possible. But I imagine it would have to be at the time that you were ingesting the germs, because if it was several hours later, your stomach would have already emptied and the germs that you had consumed on your dirty donut or whatever. And hygiene is still important. I'm not advocating that you don't wash your hands, you should. But yeah, I think quite possibly at the time, then it might be possible.
You see, many of the Czechs here, in the morning, they have a strong, what's the Slivovica, which is a plum brandy, about 55% alcohol, and they'll call it, they have one little one, they call it zdravotní, which means it's sort of like one for health. The president of the Republic, he has about a bottle a morning just to, zdravotní lahev.
And actually alcohol is used in, like you sort of alluded briefly to my travels and stuff, and alcohol is used in a medicinal capacity in a lot of places in the world. I mean,
I think, my personal, this is based on zero evidence and absolutely zero sort of know-how about the field, but one does seem to think, I mean, maybe lots of our customs, whether it be our consumption, certainly alcohol, the reason why we were consuming alcoholic beverages in the past was because it was a way to actually clean the water of many germs.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I think the consumption of alcohol has a sort of a germ-based beginning. And we were briefly talking about earlier, maybe also the reason why we kiss people or shake hands with people, that sort of contact when you meet somebody, is to do with some sort of spreading of, or preparing, widening our sort of immunity responses to various germs which are going around. I mean,
and in a sort of much more kind of even more obvious way than that, certainly when my parents were growing up, they said that if someone on the street caught measles, you'd have a measles party and all the little kids would go around and catch it, so that, you know, that sort of thing, because it was better to have it sooner rather than later, and then you had your immunity to it, and that certainly wouldn't be a good idea for some diseases. But
that's right. Chickenpox works that way.
Yeah.
When there was one of our neighbours had chickenpox, but everybody sent their kids around there to play.
Yeah.
And then you know you're sending your kids to get into, you know, to get infected, and you have this sort of little. You know, you're not sure, you know, this is the right thing I'm doing, and I'm purposely sending them to become infected, but yeah, you realise that's the right thing in the end. Okay, well, Lucy could chat for ages, but that's fantastic talk. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please, Lucy Guile from the United Kingdom. Good luck at the NHS.
God, I'll need it.
Okay, our next speaker told me indeed that half of all species on this planet, maybe some of us even here, are parasites. And that indeed the parasitic behavior seems to be such a successful strategy amongst the flora and fauna of the planet that there's layers of parasitic behavior. So there's parasites being parasitic of parasites, which are parasitic to other parasites, and you've got this hierarchy of parasicity. And Maureen Williams, who is currently working in Ireland, but you can tell from her smile that she's from America.
Yeah, it gives it away.
is an expert on parasites, and she advised me to not Google the guinea worm, or no, the guinea worm parasite, and I did, and I was rather distraught. And she's going to be telling us a bit about that.
Indeed.
So Maureen, break a leg. Don't rip out your thema like Ruth did. But yeah, good luck.
In the fight against the diseases of the future, we have a secret weapon, and it's in each and every one of us here. It's our common sense. Common sense is the reason why most of you have not heard of dracunculiasis. It's a disease that means little dragons, because that's what it feels like. Small dragons burrowing through your body, breathing fire. How have we been able to take this from 3.5 million cases in 1986 to just 30 cases last year? We used our common sense. Dracunculiasis is caused by a parasite. It's called guinea worm. And what happens is it starts its life in water fleas. When you go to take a drink of water from infected water, you accidentally drink in some of the fleas. The parasites meet in your stomach, they mate, and they're ready to reproduce. At that point, the parasite tunnels down through your leg into your foot. Your foot feels like it's on fire, and you go for some cooling relief. So you stick your foot into maybe a pond, and you feel a little bit better. But that's when the parasite strikes. The parasite tunnels out through your skin, sticks its butt into the water, and lays its eggs. The parasite then continues its life cycle, but you're stuck. You have a parasite sticking out of your leg, and you have no choice but to slowly, over the next 3 weeks, wind the parasite around a stick, because if the parasite breaks or if the parasite dies, you could die from it. How have we been able to fix this? Well, it wasn't fancy lasers, it wasn't expensive drugs. It was 2 common sense interventions. First, we gave everyone straws. The straws had filters on them, so you don't drink in the parasites in the first place, which is great. The second thing we did was we paid people to sit at common water gathering areas and say, hey you, with the parasites sticking out of your leg, you're not allowed to go in the water today. By doing those 2 things, we only had 30 cases last year. There's only 4 countries where the parasite is still found, and 2 of them didn't have any new cases last year. We are just on the brink of eradicating it, and it was by stepping back, looking for the logical solution, and working together that we were able to get to this point. Whatever diseases may come and face us in the future, I have faith that everyone in this audience could help us figure out the ways to keep people healthy and to make sure that we don't suffer from things like dracunculiasis in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. So, I mean, isn't it incredible? I often think about, isn't it incredible? Just a straw with a filter, and you can make such a huge difference.
It's incredible.
It's one of those things that seems to me, it's like, you know, just a difference in basic hygiene and washing your hands, you know, sorted out a lot of diseases in Europe. Although now we're learning that perhaps we're washing our hands a bit too much, but nevertheless. So, any questions? Yes, the gentleman over there.
Is there any way that guinea worm is ethologically or medicinally beneficial?
So the question is, can the guinea worm be beneficial in any way?
So the guinea worm actually changes the behavior of the water flea that it lives in, which can actually make them easier food for some other animals. This doesn't seem to have huge knock-on consequences. The eradication effort has not led to ecological collapse yet. In this case, it has such severe human health consequences that I would say that a little bit of potential ecological problems are probably worth it. But there's a lot of other parasites that have huge ecological relevance that really underpin their ecosystems, and those we should definitely try to protect, yeah.
So once again, nothing's black and white, nothing's just one way or the other. Any further questions? Yes. So the question or the point being made is about filtration of water to make water drinking safe, that you can use a sari. If you fold it 7 times, it might be good enough to filter through much of the bacteria. Is that true?
Absolutely. A lot of these stages are quite large, comparably, and so they would definitely get held back. And it's one of the reasons why India was one of the first countries to be rid of the parasite, which is awesome. And again, it's this common sense thinking, right? It's using what you have to solve a really big problem. And it's something that all of us have, you know? It's a secret weapon that we need to use, definitely.
Denise, you had a question. So we've seen from Maureen how straws can help save people's, at least their feet, and the question was about that. Of course, straws are problematical if we're assuming that they're made from plastic, and that plastic waste is increasingly a problem as it's accumulating in our seas and oceans. So the question was: is there any work being done on replacing plastic as the main material for generating or fabricating these straws?
So most of the straws are from a much tougher plastic than the plastic I brought today. Most of them are from PVC, and they're machine washable and all sorts of things, so they're really sturdy. You really only ever need one. So it's not the same kind of culture around their use as there is here, but you very much could use metal or something like that. The positive of plastic here is that it's biologically inert, so the plastic in the straws is not having an effect on the people as well. Like with BPA, I don't know if you remember when that happened, when we discovered that had a lot of effects on our own bodies. The plastic here is really helpful. So like anything, it's kind of a trade-off. Yeah, having long-lived use is kind of ideal. Yeah.
2 questions. There's one at the back, one up first, so yes.
So I got a stupid and a rather gross question.
Yeah.
So why does it get to the foot? Can it go out of any parts of the body actually, this worm? How does it get to the foot?
Okay, so the question is why does this worm exit from the foot? I mean, when it could presumably exit from, other orifices, real orifices, other places. I'm assuming you're alluding to that. It might be an easier point of exit rather than having to break through the epidermal layer of skin.
So one of the really fascinating things about these worms is they actually sense gravity. So the way that they move to the foot is they can actually tell which way is down, and they move down. So if you were, I don't know, a gymnast and you walked around on your hands all day and you got guinea worm, then it would probably come out of your hands instead. The reason why it does this, I think it's generally because when it tunnels through, it does make you feel the need to put your foot into the water, which is the ultimate goal. Whereas, you know, if maybe it was coming out of, in your poop, you might not go to water in order to make that happen. So I think it's evolutionarily probably better for the parasite.
Yeah, there was, okay, the man next, and then coming to you. Yep.
But is the head which is going down, or is the tail? And if it's the head, how they put the eggs? If it's the tail, how they feed afterwards? Because it's 3 weeks that you're getting out, so how it feed you in these 3 weeks?
That's a good question. So the question was, we're gradually eliminating all these. Okay, so yeah. If it's presumably it's the head which is tunneling down, but you said that it releases the eggs through its bottom. So how does it turn around through the 180 degrees? And whilst it's going through, what's its substance? What's it eating?
So it actually tunnels from the bottom. It tunnels with its feet. Worms are a lot more topsy-turvy than people. The bottom and the top are a little bit less different. So it actually tunnels with the bottom, which is why it's easy to lay its eggs out that way. And what they actually do for subsistence, worms have a very thin layer of skin, and through that skin they can absorb their nutrition. So they don't have to eat with their mouths. They actually eat through their skin, and the whole time they're stealing their nutrition from you, which makes you tired and makes the whole process even worse.
Okay. Well, okay. There's loads of questions. We're gonna have one more question, and I think you were first. So would you like to have the last question?
Okay, thanks for the release. I found this is more boring compared to other texts. I'm having the picture of all the water drink poisoned African families kids try just because of drinking not clean water. Is there any way to link these two things together? Just like give them straws and drink water through them to make them prevent from being sick? If you know.
Well, I kind of think that was a point. That was what you were saying, right? But so the question is, can you link drinking through these straws to preventing these villages and communities from getting these parasitic problems? But I presume that was the thesis of your talk.
Yeah, but it also does work for other things. So guinea worm is not the only parasite that lives in water. So the straws do prevent other parasites, and they have tested out different versions that have kind of purifying chemicals lining the inside. But the problem there is that the chemicals fade, and it's really hard to get back to some of these places once you've been once. Obviously, there's huge infrastructure problems and a lot of humanitarian need. But you know, if you have any great solutions, definitely put them out there. There's people who would be able to implement some of this, and people need help.
Okay, Maureen, fascinating talk. If I ever have a burning sensation in my foot, I will know who to ring. So thank you very much, Maureen. Moving swiftly on, closer to Prague, we have our next speaker is Ansgar Gruber, and he is from Germany, but is working in České Budějovice, part of the Czech Republic, and he's specializing in, well, he's going not parasites at all, but rather in plants and algae. And the two of us have something in common, that we've both got thin hair, but you're going to be talking a bit about how things can grow from thin air.
Yeah, thanks. I have to disappoint you, though. The nitrogen fertilizer doesn't help.
You mean I spent all that money on the nitrogen, but it's not going to help me?
No, I mean, I tried it. It doesn't help. what do we want? Okay, one thing we all have in common, we want energy, and we want to grow in size, in weight, or in numbers. And for growth, we need food. And our biggest problem would be if we ran out of food. And to feed us, we have only one resource, plants. This one here I call basalca, but I actually mean all plants or algae that we can eat. Basalca doesn't need food. She builds up her own biomass from carbon dioxide that's in the air, from water, and from nitrogen salts in the soil. And she takes her energy from the sunlight. This lifestyle is called photosynthetic. When basalca grows, I can grow and eat her parts. And now I talk for all of us, the non-photosynthetic organisms of this world. All parts of basalca contain carbon and nitrogen. But to obtain energy, I can only use the carbon. And for my growth, I need the carbon, and I also need a little bit of nitrogen. So this leftover nitrogen is actually useless to me, so I can generously give it back to basalca. And then basalca and I are ready to repeat. We're in a sustainable relationship, right? Okay, I can't fool you, and neither can I fool basalca. As long as I am growing, I cannot possibly give back as much nitrogen as I took from basalca for my growth. And that's the reason why we need nitrogen fertilizers. Fertilizers provide nutrients to the plants that we take from them for our own growth. Děkuji.
Well, that was a very clear explanation of an important cycle. Anybody concerned about the nitrogen cycle and our use of fertilizers, or does anybody have any questions here? Yes.
I have a question, because as you all know, we are running out of nitrous fertilizers. The nitrous fertilizers like that we mine, and so how are we going to produce like these fertilizers once we run out of the ones that we can mine?
So the question is that we're running out of feedstocks which are using to make these nitrous-rich fertilizers. So the question is, what are we going to do when that runs out?
Yeah. So in the case of nitrogen, we are actually in a lucky situation, and you're right, for a long time, for many centuries, it was very problematic because all the nitrogen fertilizers had to come from organic sources, so you would take the leftovers from the animals. And then they discovered some places in South America where they could harvest the poo from the seabirds, and they transported it to Europe and also saltpeter. And it was a matter of concern in the beginning of the last century because they were running out of it, and then a process was invented that is called the Haber-Bosch process, and that actually fixes the N2 from the air. And it's very energy expensive, so you have to put in lots of energy, but apart from that, the only thing, the ingredients that you need are just water and air, like N2. And for practical purposes, there's enough air on this world to sustain that. So that's not so much of a problem. There are other nutrients, though, that might turn into problems. So phosphorus, for instance, also has to be provided to the soil to increase the yield. And phosphorus is a much more difficult question, so that has to be mined at the moment, and we might run into problems in the future, but I think it's all a question of actually recycling the nutrients in the end.
If I'm not mistaken, an interesting sort of aside to that is, if I'm not mistaken, Haber won the Nobel Prize for that work. where he could fix nitrogen and you form ammonia, and then if you react ammonia with concentrated sulfuric acid, then you get the ammonium salt of the sulfur, so you can then, that's the fertilizer we use. But somebody did the mathematics on how many lives have been saved, or how many people have been able to be born thanks to this process that Haber, and it runs into the hundreds of millions, if not more. And yet the same man is responsible for the death of many millions because he also developed the poisons that were used to gas both soldiers in the First World War and then afterwards in the Second World War in the death camps of Germany. So there's a sort of an interesting, that one person simultaneously saved so many lives and took so many lives. Yeah. Anyway, that was an aside. Any other question?
Well,
yes.
Maybe a remark on the Nobel Prize. There was another Nobel Prize decades later on the mathematics of that process, actually. And that closes the circle to Juan's talks, that the mathematics, sometimes it's asking the right question in advance, but sometimes it's also solving the process, solving the questions some decades later.
Okay, so we're able, but as you said, we're able to keep this nitrogen cycle going, but it's a very energy-intensive process as well. So what I like about all these messages is that we're all the time playing catch-up. We're all the time, we come to a problem, we haven't got enough nitrogen, we fix that problem, but then that's going to cause we're going to need a lot more energy. Then we're going to have to find the problem, we're going to have to solve the problem that we need a lot more energy. Where's that going to come from? All the time we're pushing the can down the road, which leads one to come to the unfortunate conclusion is that will we ever get out of that loop? Because surely then the base problem is that we're going to have just too many mouths to feed. So what's your opinion in that case on things like technologies like GMO and what they can offer regarding, say, new plants for food which don't require so much nutrition from the ground?
Yeah, I think GMOs are a very important contribution to making food more sustainable in the future. And there are the classical GMOs that are used right now, and they meet quite some opposition from the customer side or from the consumer side because they don't offer clear advantages to the consumers or to the general public. But there are other future uses that can certainly help making agriculture more efficient. So there's possibilities of making plants more drought resistant or more salt resistant, which is about the same, because if it's very dry, then you have to supply the water and then you increase the salt content of the soil. And there are technologies now with which you can produce the genetically modified plants without leaving a trace of the genetical modification process. So there are molecular scissors, they are called CRISPR-Cas9 system, and they will cleave targeted pieces of the DNA. And afterwards, when you recover the plant has just this one molecular surgery that the intended modification, but no other side modifications. And I think that offers big chances in the future if they are applied properly, and by properly application, I mean also if that research, which is expensive, is allowed to be done, because right now there are also some restrictions in releasing those plants, and I think we need to be relaxed more about that.
I think another interesting part of this whole, this whole realm is that if you follow the actual chemicals, for example, in a globalized world now, we're buying and selling products internationally. And I was reading an interesting article that currently Spain is exporting a huge percentage of its tomatoes and oranges, let's say. And inside the tomato and oranges are huge quantities of water. And water is becoming a scarce and scarcer natural commodity for Spain. So it's not just about the actual, obvious sources of, let's say, water, or whether it be nitrogen or phosphorus or whatever it might be. But, countries are now, because of the economic structure, are actually exporting away its chemical riches. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's all sort of interesting, almost geopolitical aspects to this as well.
Yeah. There is one other aspect, and that's the effect of the nutrients that are transported with the food. So what's going on right now is that because there is much meat production in Europe that is far above the level that would be sustainable with the agriculture that is producing plant feed in Europe, we have to import the food from other areas. So there's food import from South America or from China, the soy comes. And when the animals eat that, then they give the leftovers, the manure, and it's taken to the fields. And that causes actually over-fertilization in Europe. And over-fertilization, especially with the nitrogen, that's a big problem. And that's the reason why it causes that problem is because we import implicitly with the feed for our animals, we import the nitrogen. And in the places where this animal food is produced, you actually have to fertilize. So you first apply the nitrogen fertilizer in South America, then transport the food, and then create the problem in Europe, how to dispose of the leftovers of the animals that you feed with that.
So all these delicate balances and systems are being warped by our behavior. Which, okay, so this is fascinating stuff, but we're going to have to end here and move on to. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to Ansgar. Ansgar, if you do come across the right fertilizer for our thin hair, then do let me know.
Try Bazarka.
I'll try. Yes. Does it help?
It helped. I tried it.
Yeah. Okay. We shall move on now to. Unfortunately, I'm having a great time. It's a shame that it's going to be our last talker for this evening. But certainly, although she's last, she's not least. It's a local lass, Lucia Doležálková, and she is studying biochemistry at Charles University, just around the corner here in Prague. And she enjoys lots of things, not just her science, but is keen on hiking and plants and photography. And also she plays several musical instruments, and I can see her bringing one on now. Do you want the table in the middle?
Well,
Perhaps.
I can put it here.
It's okay. As you wish. I took it away from you thinking that you might not need it, but there we go. Okay. And Lucy, we're going to get a double performance from you tonight, so this is really great. But first of all, we're going to hear about the wonderful science around plants. We are just hearing about how the export and import of plants can change, where the chemicals going around the world. Now, you're going to tell us a bit about what happens when a plant gets stressed out.
Yeah, it happens quite often.
Okay.
And
so
people do not realize usually.
okay, Lucy, the floor is yours.
I'm late. I'm terribly late. Right now, I'm standing here in front of you, having nothing to say. I'm stressed. I'm stressing out. But is there anything I can actually do about it? Can I somehow get rid of stress? Well, of course I can. For example, by fight. Or maybe another strategy. I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. Okay, fight or flight are the well-known response to stress. But do you think that plants cannot be stressed? Try to fight with no arms. Try to fly with your feet stuck in the ground. Well, there are several factors that are actually causing plant stress. Have you ever been to holidays? Have you ever left your plant at home, sicking of you and missing the water? Well, this is one of the stresses that plants are actually going through. What is actually helping plants to survive the stress, even the deadly doses of stress? These are small molecules called stress plant hormones. And they are actually very helpful when it comes to stress. For example, here, the abscisic acid is helping your poor plant left in the home while you're at the vacation. Another one, brassinosteroids. Here we have an ethylene, and some more which are helping against the parasites. Also, plants can have a parasite. And actually, we are one of them. We are eating the plants, and this is bringing me to another theme. Why should we take care of plant stress? You know, it's not just your plants in the pots that you are having at home that might be stressed. Also, the plants or the crops in the fields. In this case, plants, when are stressed, are giving a lower yield. Right now, there is 7.5 billion people living in this planet. Every 7th person at this planet is actually starving. With having stressed plants, we will not have enough of food, and this will get worse. Actually, in the next 7 years, there is going to be 8 billion people living in this planet. Can we feed them all? We cannot lean just on the politics. You know that they are not good, always. So probably we should focus more on the plant stress and the research, because the researchers or the scientists can help us solve this problem. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for explaining how it's not just us that get stressed, but it's also plants, and we got to think about them because they can't tell us directly. So, any questions from the audience regarding stress, being stressed? Are you stressed out? Yes.
Are there any other signs that the plant is stressed? Like, are there some interesting specific reactions to something like that?
So, how can we tell plants are stressed? What are the signals that they use?
If there is lack of water, for example, you can see under the microscope that the stomatas, the little mouths that our plants having, or that plants have, are closed. So this is one side. If also you can see when it's going worse and worse that the leaves are yellowing and that the plant is actually losing them. Also you can notice when there are some flies, parasites on the plant. There are many signs, and it depends on the type of the stress. It might be also too much water when the plant is flooding. Then you can see if you will make a cross-section from the stem, for example, that there are air cavities in the stem instead of normal cells. And it's because the air is needed also for the tissues underground, and when they are flooded, the roots, then the plant has to somehow distribute the air also into the roots. So these air cavities are there because of this. And there are several other symptoms of stress in plants.
Mm. Any other further questions about? Yes?
Kind of dumb question.
No question is dumb.
Are you sure?
Positive.
Only the answers can be. You will see.
So the question is, why is there a saxophone? You will see. That's the cherry on the cake for you to still experience. But maybe so here you've shown us some of the chemicals which are causing stress or.
Well, no, they are not causing stress.
Relieving stress.
They are sorry.
So they're relieving stress. And of course, when we get stressed, we also find ways to relieve ourselves of stress. And they're numerous. For some people, it's exercise. For other people, it's meditation. For other people, it's listening to music and having a hot bath. For other people, it's to have a few drinks. For other people, they might have a smoke of something. Different chemicals, different behavior patterns. So, what else do plants use? Is there any evidence that music or being caressed does that help them?
Well, I'm not well educated enough to answer this question. Okay.
For example, the future King of England, he's a great believer that if you speak to your plants, then that's going to have a stress-releasing effect on the plants, and they will benefit from that.
Yeah, there is some evidence that, for example, plants have sort of not a neural system, but that there are some electric impulses moving through the plant. So plant actually can feel, and we know these touch genes that are used for actually touch perception. So the plants can feel some vibrations. It might be also the sound vibrations, I really don't know how does this work, and I guess that no one at this point knows how this works. But yeah, there are some things that obviously plants can perceive. It might be also the sound, but we are not that far to.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
Maybe it does not like you. I don't know. My plants are growing. So maybe some perception works in this case also. Honestly, it's like if you have a pet, usually before you get one, you will get some information about how to take care of them. So, for example, I'm a really big fan of the fly-eating plants, and it is well known for them that you cannot water them with usual water. You should use either distilled water or at least some soft water, and in case you are using the tap water, the plant will die, because you know, the plant is used to live in this environment with the acidic pH, which means that if you put a tap water or water the plant with the tap water, the pH higher or increases, and that's not good for the plant, and she or it or he, whatever you want to call it,
we say it, but you know what? I like it when you say she. It's nice.
Because, you know, my plants are she.
Yeah. I think it's nice. Well, or in fact, when you were speaking about some of your drugs, you talked about it as being she. I thought it was cute. It was nice. I like it. It's nice. Okay, Lucy. Thank you. I'm going to have to call it quits here because Dash is showing me her wristwatch. So it's not saying, can I ask a question? It's
Sorry.
like, Michael. Okay, so Lucy, thank you very much for this wonderful talk about stressful plants and how they deal with it. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings to almost a close this afternoon's event. We've still got a surprise at the end, well, almost a surprise at the end. So I would like to, I think it's been a wonderful, sort of summary of all sorts of scientific endeavors and explorations. We've gone from the universal structures of black holes through viruses and bacteria and germs and plants and nitrogen cycles and all sorts of fascinating things. Maybe just before we go to our musical finale, can I ask Denise to come up to the stage? And Denise, can I just ask you, what have you taken from this afternoon? What's been for you the most amazing aspect?
I'm going to go home really quite frightened from Maureen's talk, and a little bit depressed about my stress plants in my own home. Actually, I think so. No, but can all of our participants come down? Please come back down, and let's thank you so much, because I'm always so impressed every time we have a FameLab event. It's just so brilliant to meet you all, to hear about all your studies and work. And most people are doing this in another language as well, which always absolutely blows me away. So all of you, thank you so much. It's great to have you in Prague, and thank you for the audience for some really interesting questions. So one more round of applause to everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining us here, and we're going to finish with Lucy, yeah?
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for making it such a special day. It's been fabulous listening to you all. Thank you for coming to Prague and sharing your ideas and your work. Thank you, Dasha and the British Council, Denise, for making this all happening. Thank you for coming. I hope you're richer for it. And enjoy the rest of the performance and enjoy your weekend. Okay, bye-bye.